Hey everyone, I'm Seven Investing lead advisor Maxx Chatsko. This is my first podcast here, first time hosting the podcast at Seven Investing, rather, and I'm pleased to be joined by our friend across the border. He's the co-founder and CEO of Hyasynth Bio, Kevin Chen. Kevin, how are things up in Montreal, man?
Montreal is in okay shape. It's been an interesting time, I think, for everyone, but we're doing all right up here.
Sweet. Yeah, I visited Montreal a couple years ago for some biotech conference, and I loved it, man. You guys have like awesome beer, great nightlife. There's music in the park. You guys have these like electric hybrid buses that charge themselves with robotic arms. So it's my kind of town.
Yeah, it's a good place, and we at least kept the music in the park for the whole summer. But the nightlife is a bit harder to make work during this year, I guess.
Yeah, music in the park, great for
Yeah.
the current conditions, I guess. Another great thing about Canada, you guys really love your cannabis up there. You guys were one of the first to deregulate it. You've built these regulations around the industry, and you've been a global leader in getting the industry off the ground. So the industry's really matured in recent years. You know, we have publicly traded companies now. There's multi-billion-dollar deals. There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on, but some inefficiencies still for how we grow cannabis and hemp and extract these cannabinoid ingredients, whether it's for recreational use or pharmaceutical use. So, what are some of the disadvantages of growing cannabis and hemp in greenhouses?
Yeah, so at the heart of it, like you're growing this plant. It's going to take a few months to actually go from your seed to your actual plant. There's all these processes around that. You have to manage all your genetics, and the environment all has to be really perfect. And I think one of the special things about this plant in particular that makes it different from like, tomatoes or apples or whatever else is like how much the environment and the genetics and the way that you handle the plants all kind of influence like the chemical components in the end. So on one hand, you could say yeah, it's easy to grow a plant. You can put it in the ground, it'll grow, you'll get something out of it. But when it comes to making things that are like, consistent and reliable and having supplies that are going to be available for like a pharmaceutical application, for example, or even for like a cosmetic like brand and stuff, you don't want to have like product recalls because you got like mold on your stuff or something like that, right? Um, all these things become really, really difficult to manage with this plant in particular.
Yeah, it's tough to grow, tough to manage the growing conditions. It's tough to get real good quality control, and that affects like how we extract these ingredients later once the plant's grown, and that affects product formulations. It's tough to have much consistency and build trust with consumers if you can't guarantee that you have the right quantity, the right potency of the ingredient that is supposed to be the active ingredient. So Hyacinth Bio has a pretty interesting solution to that. So what does Hyacinth Bio do?
Yeah, so our basic premise is to create strains of yeast that will produce cannabinoids. So that means that you've got like I mean, it's similar to like a baker's yeast. It's a yeast, you grow it with sugar and water. It'll take about 6 days to grow in a big steel tank. At the end of those days, you pipe that into like a purification system, and at the end of that, you're isolating purified THC or purified CBD or whatever other cannabinoid that you're interested in working with. Um, and the goal there is to kind of like, it's a there's this funny idea of like tradition in like what's more traditional and not traditional, and like cannabis is kind of traditionally grown, like you grow cannabis. Industrial fermentation is also very traditional, like there's industrial fermentation like everywhere in the world. And you could argue that it's older than maybe growing cannabis or something, like I don't know. But either way, we're trying to take advantage of industrial fermentation as like a traditional and established manufacturing practice, and then use that to make these really, really interesting products that are normally only found in a cannabis plant.
Yeah, right. So it's a way to like whack down a lot of the process steps. We have more control over the growing conditions. It's a lot easier to manage like temperature. Light's not
Yeah.
a factor, obviously, in a steel bioreactor, but yeah, we can get more consistent product quality. We can also get much higher volumes with a smaller footprint, right? Like what would maybe a commercial scale industrial biotech facility be able to pump out maybe per year or I don't know what the metric might be.
Yeah, it's depends on how big your tanks are. I mean, these things go up to hundreds of thousands of liters, and if you think about a good, analogous case is the production of insulin, where, that's something that has to be done on a global scale, like, serving millions of people, and always has to have like, consistent back records, consistent supply, like no contamination. Like there's very, strict constraints around that production process, and that's kind of what we want to create for the cannabinoids, which are also going to be like revolutionary medicines and health and wellness products. Um, so you're absolutely right. Like all these things, like, we know how to do this consistently. We know like this industrial fermentation is a backbone already of like a lot of our products today in both consumer products and in pharmaceutical products. And we really like, yeah, there's so little risk involved in the batch process that you can actually, this makes sense. And I mean, square footage wise, if you want to like look at that, then it's acres of cannabis greenhouse space, but down to like a few thousand square feet kind of thing.
Yeah, and another interesting thing, with industrial biotech, it's kind of had this difficult road so far, but like at first, a lot of companies targeted these big markets. They looked at the volumes of the products that were around, right? So everybody went to like fuels, transportation fuels, and then they, oh, it's a multi-trillion-dollar market. Yeah, well, there's a reason for that. It's really hard to do that with biology. And then they kind of like overcorrected, and everybody went to the opposite end of the spectrum, and they picked these like super niche, tiny little rare ingredients. We make, 1 metric ton a year globally, and they said, oh, well, biology can do this now, and it's, $10,000 a kilogram or something. And then that didn't work out either, because you make one batch and then it sits on a shelf and you sell it kind of slowly. So I think, cannabinoids are at this sweet spot of, there's this huge market recreationally. So it's a valuable product, and there's some unique pain points in, cultivating plants that industrial biotech can really solve. So uh, it's a good market for industrial biotech to kind of dust itself off a little bit. This like next generation industrial biotech, right? Not like lactic acid for food or ethanol, but more like synthetic biology.
Yeah.
So,
I was going to add a quick comment to that. I guess you're absolutely right, and it's been nice to like
yeah,
kind of, see you every now and then over the years, and kind of watch the space kind of develop. I mean, for us, we started in 2014, which was right around, I think, the tail end maybe of when like biofuel stuff was really like cutting back, right? Um, and we saw this opportunity in cannabinoids. At the time, it was like, I was pretty naive about most things because it's my first company. I was just coming out of a bachelor's degree basically, so I just kind of jumped in and went to see how it was. And yeah, a lot of these things lined up, but even still, there's some like, of course, there's some risk involved with the cannabis like market itself and all this like other complications. But at the heart of it, we found a really nice, interesting, like natural product that can be made using a yeast, and that has this like market potential that's defined, and even like, FDA approved products that are out there already. So it's definitely past the point of, ultra niche like fragrance or flavor stuff, and definitely, uh, not going to fall into the same problem as with biofuels, where it's like, this like kind of large scale volume thing, that like we're not gonna. It's like it's feasible to like, the cost metrics start to work out. They start to make sense. It's not like a industrial chemical kind of industry, right?
yeah, exactly. And I've talked to some of the flavor and fragrance companies who've partnered, with a lot of synthetic biology companies or industrial biotech, and they have some colorful things to say about synthetic biology, but we won't get into any of that. So, sticking with the ingredients, though, so you guys are working on CBD oil initially. You just became the first to market out of any company to do this with a cultured cannabinoid. And some competitors, there's a number of companies trying to develop, cultured cannabinoids, but they're working on a different ingredient. It's called CBG, right? I think it's a precursor to CBD oil, but
Yeah.
there's some differences in the market and maybe how that might be formulated. So what are some of the differences between, CBD and maybe a less established market like CBG?
Yeah, it's I guess you almost just said it, where it's like it's kind of a less established opportunity. Where with CBD, it's been around. It has the FDA approved products like on the market today. There's really clear growth and like interest in that product in particular, from a consumer end, and ultimately from like a branding and cosmetics and pharmaceutical development end as well. And then CBG is interesting because it starts to fit in the category of like things that we know exist in the plant, but the plant isn't very good at making, and therefore like it kind of makes sense to try and have a yeast do this stuff. However, the trade-off there is that you're, as a company, you want to try and sell CBG, and then you kind of have to ask yourself like, okay, who's going to buy it and for what purpose? And then there's some research out there for CBG and where it might be used. But it's all very early days. Whereas like CBD has been around for long enough that there's clear use cases for it, right? And
Yeah,
in
and
that
that's
sense, I
another great
guess.
thing about this market. I mean, go
No,
ahead.
okay. I was gonna just add briefly, like it's and that's I mean, at the heart of it, that's one of the key advantages of like industrial fermentation and doing the synthetic biology stuff is that, you can have a yeast that will produce CBG, you can have another yeast that produces CBD, and for us, as a company, as a strategy, like we've of course chosen CBD as maybe one of our lead targets, but we still have the full range of cannabinoids like behind us, where it's like we're looking for those market opportunities with these new cannabinoids, with these more rare ones, and then there's like a long list of compounds there that we have kind of on the back burner, like ready to bring to the front whenever the timing is right.
Yeah, well, that's perfect. That was actually what I was just gonna say. So, I think this is another interesting market. How many cannabinoids are there? There's like 100 or something, right? There's a lot, dozens, 100, something like that.
Yeah, I think people are saying over 150 nowadays. I think when we first started, it was something like 117, and there's like, you know, people were keeping track of exactly how many. And now I think people are saying more like, it's over 150, like something something huge number.
We'll stop counting at
Yeah,
150. That sounds good to me. But yeah, there's so many options, and with developed markets like THC and CBD, I mean, it's a great way for industrial biotech to kind of get on its feet. There's established markets. You get there, you get your business going, and then you can kind of go and create newer markets once you're already established. I think that was one of the flaws initially in industrial biotech. We thought, oh, we'll make this new fuel molecule, and then you have to go make a new market for that fuel molecule or this ingredient, and it just kind of seemed like not the best way to start off.
totally. And that's like I
Now,
mean, it's a common problem in maybe tech in general, or like startups in general. You kind of have to figure out your product market fit in the end, right? And with this industrial biotech, there's a lot of investment in the R&D portion of things. And if you're doing investment and risk in the R&D as well as in your market, then like you start to have like these funny problems, right?
yeah, I used to call it lab tricks. People would come out and say, "Aha, we made the yeast and it makes this thing and it's gonna do that," and it's like, I don't know, man. I don't think there's a market for it yet, and it tended to prove true. A lot of companies kind of went bankrupt or have pivoted 700 times. So we'll see how it goes. I
Yeah,
think the fields overall, though, kind of there's still a lot of hype, but it's maturing and we're getting better at it. I think, hopefully.
definitely. I think so for sure. Yeah.
So Hyacinth Bio recently was the first to market. You guys, you have a strategic partnership with Organigram Holdings, which is a publicly traded company. So what does your roadmap look like? I mean, you hit this milestone now. It's second half of 2020. The next year or two, it looks like scaling up that process and getting more product to market.
Essentially, yeah. And broadly speaking, is um, I need to close my Slack. I'm getting messages that are like important things that I'm waiting to hear back on. I'm like, oh yes, good news. You'll hear about it tomorrow. So the
Good.
what was I gonna say? So the yeah, for the next year or so. So yeah, we've got our first sales down, and that's really nice to kind of like hit that ball out of the park. Now we can kind of like keep growing that those sales and expanding those opportunities. I would say broadly speaking, like we started out this mission where like we saw this huge opportunity in cannabinoids as, globalized health products where, maybe you're even replacing aspirin, like as like a product, it's like, here's a thing that you can use for migraines that like, might work better. And actually in a lot of cases, people are like, oh yeah, cannabis or CBD is the way to go for migraines. So we still want to get there, and the steps towards getting there are going to include, scaling up our process. They're going to include forming more strategic relationships with different companies who have these like focuses on like maybe treating certain types of cancer, maybe treating epilepsy, maybe treating pain, maybe going into like cosmetic products, and we ultimately want to become like, enable them to create those products and to scale those products. Because right now, I feel like a lot of conversations that I have with major brands go the direction of like, yeah, we're interested in cannabis, like we've heard about it, maybe they've investigated it, but they don't want to jump in. And there's all this controversy around the ingredient. There's all this controversy even from like the FDA putting out a report just a few months ago where it was like half the products on the cannabis, hemp CBD market like don't have CBD in them, kind of thing. Like that's not what you really want to be a part of, especially when you're like a major brand and you'll lose billions of dollars maybe from this kind of fallout. So we really want to target those opportunities and target those risks and say like, well, our system fundamentally is different. It's fundamentally more consistent. It's fundamentally more sustainable. And these are all like really, really, really great things that a brand or pharmaceutical company or a clinical trial can actually rely on. So that's forming those key relationships will be important for the next few months at least. And then, of course, scale up is going to be another one of the things that we get done.
Yeah, so in your conversations with companies, I mean, are they seeing it? Are they seeing the potential of cultured cannabinoids? And do they just want to see it kind of like show me, don't tell me kind of thing? Like they want to see this be commercialized first before they kind of jump in?
It's I would say it's a mix of things. I think in the end, yeah. If I think back to some of the conversations I had in the early days in like 2014 when we started out, it was like, people didn't believe it was possible. Basically, it's like, yeah, sure, get a yeast to produce this stuff. Good luck or something like that, right? But now we've done it, and that's I think where the bar is starting to move, where like we can send samples. We can actually like you can hold it in your hands physically. Like we've got the yeast, we can send it to a facility and have it be manufactured, and we've proven all that out now. So we're past that point of speculation, and now it's going to be like really exciting to see what happens next.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's like I said, there's so many like tailwinds for this to be a great market for industrial biotech. And I think one of the markers of success for the field and living technology is um, when we drop these prefixes, right? So like I always use this example of ethanol. Well, and we used to make ethanol as a byproduct of like petroleum refining processes, right? We made very small quantities. We didn't really use it how we use it today, where it adds oxygen to transportation fuels. But then in like 2005, I think was the first iteration here in the United States of the renewable fuel standard, and it just created this whole industry for, well, yeah, we're going to make ethanol through fermentation now. But it's funny to me that if you look back at like the first regulations or articles, it's always referred to as bioethanol. And it's like, it looks funny now, right? Because we just kind of dropped the bio prefix. Because to us, it's like, well, yeah, no, like, how else would you make it? It's a biological product. So I'm curious, like, I mean, obviously, cannabinoids are a natural product, so is ethanol. But I'm curious if one day we'll drop that cultured cannabinoids or all the funny things we put before it, and just like, well, yeah, we make it through yeast. Like, how else would we make this stuff?
Yeah, it's funny. It's almost like I imagine looking at again like an analogy like insulin, where it's like, oh, just call it bioinsulin. It's like there's always bio, like there's never non-bio
Yeah.
insulin or something like that. It's always cannabinoids is the same thing, and we've had a lot of internal brainstorming on what words you could use in this case, and even like some. I would say we've some successful experiments, some failed experiments in terms of how we should call these things. But biosynthesis seems to be like a word that's starting to stick around, at least the investor world. Or I like the word cellular agriculture as well, but I think that's not quite as popular. Um, So yeah, we'll see. Cultured is, and yeah, cultured cannabinoids. Like we'll see how long that one sticks around, or maybe we'll switch that over eventually. But um, uh, again, the dream has always been like a bit of like, where we fit on like a bottle or where we fit on a shelf in a pharmacy uh, uh, is going to be um, hopefully closer to that like aspirin kind of feel. It's something that's there. It's there. It doesn't. It's not like it's a special technology thing. It's not like a niche, like, oh man, like got to get the new like bio stuff or whatever. It's just it's what it is. It's the standard. And then maybe the niche is more like the cannabis thing, where it's like, oh, I have to get the cannabis leaf because that's what I want to use, or a cannabis flower. I should actually correct myself, or else I'll get called out. Um, like some people will still want to like, use cannabis in that way for recreational use and whatever else, and that'll become more of a niche. Whereas like the standard for how cannabinoids are used is coming from like our process essentially.
Yeah, I did some early work on the messaging of like SynBio, and there, like you said, there's this crazy like alphabet soup of words, and there's like 17 words for everything, and everyone's trying to figure out which one or three fit. But
Yeah.
you guys have always been pretty good at it. I've always been impressed by Hyasynth Bio and your messaging. And even on your website, if anyone wants to check it out, you guys have a great animated animation of how the process works and the benefits of it. So definitely encourage people to check that out. So sticking with that for our wrap up question here, industrial biotech, like we said, it's kind of had this, at least next generation industrial biotech's had this kind of difficult road in the last decade or so. So outside of cannabinoids, what are some products that you think have this a good fit for what we just said? There's great economics, there's great pain points that we can solve with industrial biotech. Does anything stand out?
Other products than cannabinoids, I guess. um
Yeah, or is
Let
that
me
it?
think.
Just
Yeah,
cannabinoids.
just cannabinoids. It's the only thing that exists. No, I guess there's a few
Well, we're
ideas
done.
that are really interesting coming up now. I mean, I'm a super fan of like Perfect Days stuff. Like, we started around the same time as they did, and I'm sure you're probably familiar with their story a bit too. And that's like uh,
Uh,
it also sits on this borderline of like kind of it's milk. It's kind of a lower cost ingredient, but it seems like that might actually work out in the end. Um, and then I guess there's the whole like alternative protein space, which is all kind of, it strays away from like the metabolic engineering that we do and starts to get into more like fermentation technology and other things, which is exciting. So there's a lot of potential there for that. Um, and then I'm also really excited about getting into things that can't be made using a chemical process or from like a natural process. So like, for example, like we have a series of cannabinoids that like, modifications that we've done using our biological system that can't be done using a chemical system. It can't, obviously don't occur naturally. And those are going to become unique products one day. And I think there's similar, some of the newer synthetic biology companies are heading that direction where it's like, oh, there's going to be these new and interesting opportunities that are going to be especially for a biotechnology kind of, synthetic biology approach. And that's really exciting too.
yeah, I agree. And like even I think like with the biofuels thing or other products they've used. I mean, I always thought, well, why aren't we just using this for like where does biology have an advantage? Let's take advantage of enzymes and proteins and metabolic processes. So I agree with you. I think hopefully there's more companies starting down that road now. So that's
Yeah,
encouraging.
totally.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, thanks for joining me here today. Does Hyacinth Bio have a Twitter handle or anything people can? Are Canadians allowed on Twitter? I'm not really sure. What's
No, we,
the?
we banned that here after, I don't know. Never mind. No, Twitter's allowed. Actually, I don't even, we might still keep TikTok. I don't even know if that's going to become a Canadian security concern too. But anyways, no, we do have a Twitter handle. It's at Hyacinth Bio. We do tweet once in a while, but definitely check out our website. Definitely check out the animation that you mentioned. That's like a really cool, piece to scroll through and see what the project looks like, at least from in some abstraction. Um, and yeah, feel free to reach out.
Great, man. Hope to have you back.
Yeah, likewise.